Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Welcome to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and as always, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio Barston. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And we are always happy to have with us our producer, Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
All right, so we've done one of these before, but we want to do another special episode. This is one of those times where we take a really deep dive into some of the science of behavior. And so this special episode, we're going to take a deep dive into one of the 7 dimensions. If you didn't hear our previous episode, just to give you a little background, in 1968, there was an article published in the very first issue of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, and it was published by Baer, Wolf, and Risley, and the title of the article is Some Current Dimensions of Applied Behavior Analysis. This article was really a seminal article in our field of behavior analysis, and it really defined the 7 dimensions that build kind of the foundational blocks for our science of behavior. And these are applied, behavioral, analytic, technological, conceptual systems, affective, and generality. So these really help to inform that science of behavior that I talk about all the time. And today we're going to focus specifically on the dimension of applied. So, as I always open with a question, what do we mean by applied?
So with applied, we're really getting to that concept of socially significant behavior, right? And we look at targeting behavior that's not just convenient for the student or the teacher, but it is much more socially significant, meaning it's meaningful, meaning it is important, and that it impacts positively a quality of life. And sometimes it's okay to target some of those convenient behaviors because they may really improve the quality of life. But really, we're talking about applied in a social setting, that it's not just a random behavior that happens in a vacuum. It is much more about real life and the social setting and the social context, and just kind of for us, be it the school setting or the home setting or any of those complex systems.
Yeah, Dory, I think the phrase just because you can doesn't mean you should kind of applies here, right? Like we can think about, yeah, we can change people's behavior. We can use the tools that we have and the strategies and the principles to make changes to people's behavior, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so it's taking kind of what we can do and putting it in the context of what is going to be helpful to this person given their different environments, the different things they want to do in life, building in sort of that voice and choice and self-determination into the process, and really being targeted and thoughtful about our interventions and the behaviors we're trying to increase and decrease.
Yeah, and this goes back to, just because we're taking a really deep dive, to give a little bit more context. The science of behavior really does come from our experimental behavior analysis. And that's when people think about things like the pigeons pressing the bars or the mice running the maze or pigeons pressing buttons, those kinds of things. And while those experiments were really important because they did give us the principles of behavior, those aren't socially significant behaviors, right? It doesn't really matter if a pigeon can press a button or press a bell or press a bar. It doesn't change anything really for the pigeon or for the people around them. But what that did was give us those foundational principles. What we're really talking about is the importance of how do we apply those so that people can have a better quality of life, whether that's being able to read better, whether that's being able to go into a restaurant and order food, whether that's being able to navigate your community. All of those, I would argue, are probably socially significant behaviors to individuals because it opens up opportunities for them.
So, Selena, I can't help but infuse a moment of levity here because we're talking about the pigeons and, the Pavlov's dogs and the rats. And I will say, however, that the latest study made me feel very validated because apparently teaching rats how to drive is indeed improving their quality of life. There is research, and it's actually coming, I believe, right, coming from VCU, that says that rats who know how to drive, who have been, conditioned and trained and all those things, actually seem to really, really enjoy the activity. So it's just a little moment of levity to throw in as we're making the transition, talking about pigeons and rats and animals into the setting and into the quality of life. And I absolutely loved Daniel's quote of just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should, right? Because I think that speaks to this in a really nice, succinct way. And I do think that there's lots of room for when we think about what is socially significant and what is improving the quality of life to really think about based on whose judgment, right? Am I deciding that this is improving your quality of life? Or have you had an opportunity to engage in this in a much more self-determined way, in a much more shared decision making? And I say this recognizing that not in every setting that's gonna be an opportunity, right? When we talk about safety, this is kind of a non-negotiable. But I think whenever we are developing interventions that we believe to be socially significant, I think it's really important to really analyze them to see if they are. And one of the things is kind of going deep in my years of experience. When I was first starting out, I had a colleague who very strongly felt that the student should end their sentences on ma'am or sir. And this was, I was teaching in Mississippi. This is a really big cultural piece. But I think about, is that the best intervention, right? Is it more important to communicate your needs and to be able to man something than to really focus our interventions on ending every comment with ma'am or sir?
So, two things. One, not to derail the conversation, but VCU, just for our listeners who are out there who don't know, is Virginia Commonwealth University. And I think Emily will post a link to that story in the show notes if you're more interested in that. But I do think there's a couple pieces here. There's a quote from the article that I think is really nice here, and it says, "The label applied is not determined by the research procedures used, but by the interest which society shows in the problem being studied." And so I think your point about, the ma'ams and the sirs, now, if that's going to, socially shun somebody, maybe it is something that is important to that individual or to that micro society. Now, do I think that that's the most important thing? No, because I agree with you on the priority scale. There's probably other things that student would benefit from more if we were to spend time with that. And where do we want to spend the time of our interventions? And I think, my big takeaway with this dimension is that when we're making choices, we need to make choices because of the importance to that individual and or the society. I'm going to use society, but the society in which they live. And that might be their school community, that might be their family, that might be their actual community, or it might be society at large. And I mean, behavior analysis itself can be applied to really large societal problems, including things like, hey, we have traffic issues, or hey, we have, I actually listened to a study, well, I listened to a presentation on a study about space exploration and the application of behavior analysis. So there are big societal applications of this. But to your point, I think we do always need to ask, who is this important to? Is it just important to me, or is this important to the individual with whom I'm working? And how will it better enhance their life and their quality of life?
And there's one more point that we haven't touched on yet, but I think comes up in Bear Wolf and Risley's description of applied dimension, is that piece of sometimes because of that social application, because of the detailed intricacies that those social settings give us, we do lose a bit of that experimental control. So while it suffers a little bit or potentially a lot, right? Again, if we are comparing like a lab setting versus a classroom environment setting, those are vastly different contexts, right? And so we understand that when we identify socially significant behaviors and when we put our interventions in place, we may not have that perfect experimental control. And that's okay, because the idea is that it's, the cost benefit analysis is much more in the benefit side, where we are improving the quality of life, which is a more important task in this conversation, in this context, than having a really strong experimental control. So I just wanted, as I know we're taking slightly deeper dives into this, I wanted to unpack for folks who really want to know about the dimensions and kind of want to hit all the little pieces of that.
No, I think that's a really important point. And it's not to say like, oh, we don't need to take data and it doesn't matter. We're just going to apply this and hope it works. That's not the intent. But we know, and we know this from educational research in general, when we do, strict, really hard, good research, the conditions are very tightly controlled and they don't always transfer exactly into the classroom in the way that we want them to, or in the way that would make most sense. But what we learn is, okay, this worked at least under these controls, or at least under this circumstance. And so we have a really high likelihood it's going to work under these circumstances. But that's why our data are really important to help us know if that's actually true.
And I think, Daria, you were sort of talking about, and maybe I'm misconstruing it, but sort of we don't have that experimental control over it. And I think from an applied standpoint, to kind of bridge off what Celine was saying, I think that's a feature rather than a bug, right? It gives us the opportunity to sort of explore outside of sort of what we think we're controlling or what we think we're manipulating or trying to implement, and look at the environment more broadly and more, in a real life setting, right? Like a real life is not a lab. And so being able to sort of identify where maybe some weaknesses of an intervention are, or where there's opportunities to make an adjustment to the environment that might be more sustainable or generalizable for the future, I think is a feature of that. If we're kind of connected and thinking about, if things are not working exactly, if we're continuing to explore, continuing to gather that data, we're actually setting people up for additional and more generalized success.
All right. Well, I think that was a good deep dive into this dimension. So just to kind of sum it up, the intention of the dimension of applied is really the application of the science of behavior into the real world, and that we really do focus on problems that are socially significant. And while we may not have the same level of experimental control, we still know that the foundation and the science of behavior is applicable in the real world. So good conversation. Daniel, Daria, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I do want to give a shout out to Kelly Lambert, who is the researcher who is quoted in the article about rats who are driving, and it is coming from the University of Richmond. So I just wanted to clarify that and give appropriate attribution. And really, I think as soon as you finish this episode on the applied dimension, you should definitely check out the article about driving rats.
Well, thank you, obviously, for the clarification. We want to give appropriate credit. But yes, always, you learn new things when you listen to this, right? Always fun. So, all right, that said, Emily, also thank you to you for your help and your support.
Thank you.
And with that, we say thank you to our listeners, and we hope to see you on our next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cbis@odu.edu, visiting www.cbisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CBISVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.